I'm broke. My feet hurt.
Inside the mind of a carjacker.
And that bitch is slipping.
It makes me want to creep.
What is up, big boys? Welcome to the Hardcore Bucks fan podcast. Formerly Jake and Chuck Talk Bucks, but now, since we are straight up gangsters up in this piece, we're going to go with Buck Life as the name going forward. Chuck, why don't you introduce today's guest?
Today we've got a guest. He runs his own podcast, a friend of the show, known as Brent. If you are on Real GM Talking Bucks, you'll know him as B. Strasburg. That's where he's also on Twitter. And his show is the AB Conversation, which he runs with a friend of his. And talk a little bit of all things nerdy, video games, movies, wrestling, kind of anything a little geek culture or whatever you want to call it. But our guest today is Brent.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, and now that we got your shameless plug out of the way here,
shameless plug.
Why don't we get right into it? Yeah. Why don't we get right into it? There's the stadium, of course, has got to be the big topic of conversation. Since we last recorded one of these, the stadium deal was approved by the House by a vote of 52 to 34, which was actually a little bit closer than I thought it was going to be. After all the assurances I was given, but it passed, so that's good news for any Bucks fan, no matter what you think of the deal itself. But the next step is Governor Walker is going to be signing, on Wednesday?
Wednesday the 12th. It's a few days from recording. You may listen to this, depending on how quick you are on listening. He may have already signed it. He may be signing it very soon, but yeah, it's just a couple days from now over at State Fair.
That's the one thing I love about a podcast, because somebody could pull up this podcast in like 3 years and the stadium's already built and we're talking about it now as if it hasn't happened yet.
Well, if you are listening in 3 years, hopefully we have a championship under our belt by then. But the next step, of course, is going to be the city council, and after that the county board has to approve it. But what I want to talk about now is when can we celebrate? Because I told myself, no matter what, after the first vote, I'm not celebrating this thing until the shovels are in the ground. I mean, how confident are you that? I mean, it's got to be pretty close to 100% now, but I'd say I'm at about 90. I'm not celebrating until shovels hit ground. Brent, what do you think?
I'm at like a solid 95%. I think it got to the point where when I'm wearing the new Bucks jersey today.
It looks great, by the way.
And thank you. And I got to the point where I'm like, well, I'm not going to buy the new Bucks jersey until I'm at least reasonably assured
didn't want the collector's item.
that I'm going to get more than like a year of use out of this. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident. I think at this point the biggest hurdle by far has been leaped over, and it's just a matter of when, not if, at this point. So
yeah, and I think I mentioned it last time we recorded an episode. I was pretty confident from the start. I never really thought this deal wouldn't get done. I was probably 90% the whole time, and now I'm at 99. There's always a chance until the thing is well on its way. Even they put shovels in the ground, they've got a lot of cleanup to do on that lot. Something could go wrong during that process.
Well, it's funny. I'd be lying if I didn't say that I was a little bit worried, because everybody that I would talk to, they'd always ask me, because they know I'm a huge Bucks fan, like, is this stadium deal going to get done? What's going on with it? And I'd say, no, don't worry about it. It's 100% done deal. But I'm not going to lie, when it got down to the voting, a little bit inside of me, I'm going, oh my goodness, this better pass.
Right.
Well, and I'm not even sure if the voting had gone the other way. The owners have a lot at stake. I'm not sure that there wasn't some more give that could have been done. We've discussed this online in various places. Was there more money available through Herb Cole, through the current ownership regime? Could they throw in naming rights? I mean, it feels to me, they put their offer out at the table, and I think paying for half of it, that's certainly a better deal than a lot of cities get. And it was a very generous first offer. And maybe that was the final offer, but I think even if the voting had gone the other way, I was still confident that they would have, maybe not this year because, the politicians, they need their vacation time. They work really hard for those 3-4 weeks a year they work. So they got to take
How do
their
you really
vacation
feel
time.
about that?
But, so I think they would have got it done. Even if it didn't happen this year, I think they would have come back to the drawing board down the road. Now, I think Governor Walker didn't want it to come to that because He's obviously running for president now, and he wants this
against Donald Trump.
Yeah. So he wants this. This is a big signature piece of legislation, and obviously he's got his conservative type legislation that he passed back in 2010 that's very well documented. Don't need to discuss it. There's lots of protesting.
Yeah.
And
we don't want any fist fights breaking out on our podcast.
So that happened, and he's got that. But now this is something that's bipartisan. The vote totals both in the Senate and the Assembly, despite you said they were closer than you necessarily expected, they were still for legislation in today's politics. They were very wide margins of victory. A lot of votes. You go to watch the Supreme Court, it's 5-4 almost every single time. When something's not split along party lines, that's huge. So this kind of gives Walker something that's bipartisan to put on his notch post for when he's running for president.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's one thing, whatever you feel about the Bucks, whatever you feel about Scott Walker, I think if you're a citizen of this state, there's a lot to be proud of in that there was a lot of bipartisan work that was done on this deal.
Absolutely.
And you typically don't see that in politics today.
Right.
So what I do want to ask, though, is now that we know how confident we are that it's going to get done, when are we going to see these shovels hitting the ground? Because that's when I can finally celebrate, go streaking down Water Street, whatever I plan on doing with this. When do you think it's going to happen, Brent? Do you think it's going to be October, September, November?
I would suspect that maybe October to November-ish we'll see that. I think with Milwaukee still needing to do their part of everything, I think it's going to be a little bit of time before we see that. But yeah, I think sometime, hopefully before snow starts to fly, we'll at least make that first step towards the arena.
And that's I think, and I don't know. I'm obviously not on the internal meetings between what the ownership's goals are. I would imagine they want to take this winter because there's a lot of cleanup on that land. It's fairly well documented. If you're not familiar with the lot, there's just some junk that's buried under the ground. There's old cement posts. It's estimated.
Wasn't there environmental issues that they had too?
It's estimated something like $4 million to clean this thing up and just get it ready to even start building on it. And I don't believe the $4 million figure even includes things like putting in sewage and all the stuff that you need for a building. Electrical and water.
Yeah,
sewage.
Just do outhouses or potties throughout.
So my guess is they want to do that over the winter. That's not really actually building that way. Next spring they can start the actual building. And I don't even know. I'm not a builder, so I don't know what type of time frame it takes to clean that up. Can they just dig the whole thing up and call it, ship it off, call it a day? I don't know. I don't know how involved that is and how careful they need to be. But my guess is sometime in November. It wouldn't surprise me to see them try to time it around the home opener, which is always around. I haven't looked at the schedule offhand, but it's always around Halloween. Have they even released the schedule yet?
No.
I don't think we don't even have schedules yet. That's why I did try to look that up a couple days ago. So my guess is around the home opener, which will be late October, early November. I wouldn't be shocked to see them coincide with some sort of ceremonial thing during the day, and then you got the home opener at night. That just seems to be the kind of big draw you'd want to do for a season opener.
Sure, and you're going to have a lot of people in town already, so you can have them do your little photo ops with the shovels and all that. If they need volunteers, I'd be more than happy. I think you guys would too. But
they could have them bring your own shovel night.
Yeah.
And
make it like a minor league baseball thing.
Yeah. Minor league teams are great at promotions. That's. The big league teams, they don't need to do that, but they should really take notice. They do some fun things.
I'll take a shovel full of dirt as a souvenir.
Yeah.
Do my part.
Who wouldn't want that,
Well, there you go.
Put it in a jar.
You're on notice. There's your next promotion. You're welcome.
Yeah, put it in a jar, put it on your shelf. It's a talking piece.
Oh, good. Well, okay, so we're pretty confident on the stadium and that. I think we can move on from that for a while, but I want to talk a little bit about our boy Giannis Antetokounmpo, my favorite Buck. He is playing for Greece this summer for their international team. What competition is it?
I don't even
know what they call it.
Yeah, they have so many. Every summer they have one, and I don't know what this one, FIBA something. And he just did the America versus Africa game as well.
And he is a beast. I don't know if you've seen pictures of Giannis lately. He's definitely put on weight. It made me very happy to see. He's looking more and more like Kevin Garnett every day to me.
Okay.
Well, and he's got a couple inches on Kevin Garnett, and that's, because Kevin Garnett's, 6'10"?
Well, he was listed at 6'11", but a lot of people thought Kevin Garnett was actually like a 7'1", and he didn't want to be listed at over 7 feet because he
Okay.
wanted to be a small forward when he came into the league. But
Gotcha.
either way, they're of similar stature in that, so it's good to see Giannis. I mean, not so much the size, but the strength, I think, is what you're really looking forward, or what you really want to see from him, mainly because I think he's going to be a power forward, given his shot blocking abilities, and hopefully that's something he can continue to develop as well. So he's working on his game, he's working on his body, but one thing I do have to bring up is Dante Exum, who was the 5th overall pick, I believe, of the Utah Jazz. Had kind of a rough rookie year. He's point guard from Australia, 6'6". There's a lot of things to like about him. Tore his ACL recently training with the Australian national team. So there's been a lot of hot debate on these multi-million-dollar investments, NBA players. Do you think they should be participating with these national teams if there's that much of an investment?
I mean, I think it kind of depends. I think it seems like they just make up these tournaments like this one. It's like, what is this for?
Right.
Like, what's the point of it? Like, in that case, really, if it's just a tournament for tournament's sake, maybe
so you're
not.
thinking more Olympics would
Yeah,
be,
right.
that's more understandable.
Right, like if it's Olympics, sure, you're fighting for national pride and USA and Hexa Jim Duggan and all that stuff, you know.
Ho!
But if it's something like this, sure. I mean, I get it from the standpoint of like, okay, this is cool. You get to, and it's cool. Like you get to play with Chris Paul if you're on the American team. You get to play with all these big stars, and you get to be kind of in that, like Michael Carter Williams, kind of trying out and kind of being like the 40th man in the rotation of this. But at least
Christian Laettner,
right? But at least he's in the mix, and it's kind of cool to be like, okay, he's learning. He can potentially learn something from doing stuff like this. But at the same time, some of these players are under $15, $20 million a year contracts.
Yeah, look at Paul George.
Right.
I mean, I think there was a lot of discussion after Paul George had was it an Achilles injury? I can't
Well,
recall.
I mean, he blew up his whole knee.
Yeah,
like, his
it was
whole
hideous to see.
His is on that level of the Andrew Bogut or those gruesome, the injuries you never want to see, and they happen once every 5 to 10 years. Someone in
Sure.
some, whether it's
Sean
football,
Livingston,
basketball, exactly. Sean Livingston, Andrew Bogut. You got him in football. Johnny Knox. Johnny Knox. That was probably the worst one. But don't YouTube that unless you like gruesome things.
If you're a masochist, go for it. They got plenty of
if you've
material.
not seen it and you like freakish injuries, just look at his was the worst.
Can we put this in wrestling terms? Is that injury comparable to when Sid jumped off the top rope towards the end of WCW?
No, why'd you have to bring that up? Dude, definitely don't YouTube that. That was... Ugh.
Yeah,
I have a stomachache thinking about it.
My thoughts on the whole international thing, I kind of go along the same lines as Brent. When it's just, they do it every year, and this was a complaint we always saw with Ersan when he was on the Bucks, and he's no longer there, obviously, this year, but he was playing every single year for Turkey, and then it seemed he'd start the season kind of exhausted because he never got a break. And to a certain extent, these guys are going to be working out, they're going to hit the gym and all that while they're off. But I think there's a difference between working out, playing a little light pickup ball, and playing competitively for your international team. And obviously Giannis is young, he's got a lot to learn, he's got a lot of energy. We'll see if he continues to do this and it tires him out. But my personal thought is Olympics, that's one thing. I understand national pride. You want to get out there, you want to get the gold medal, the silver, bronze, whatever, the Olympics. Not everyone's going to get the gold. But just playing for your country, that's something that's very proud for a lot of people, and I take no fault with that.
Well, there was a little bit of a conversation started after the Paul George thing, and I think it may get intensified now as Dante Exum was, he still is supposed to be one of the cogs in Utah's future there, but some people are trying to say now that, well, maybe we should just go back to amateurs playing for these teams instead of pros. Do you think that's too drastic of a measure?
I don't know. I think, especially when it comes to the Olympics, you want the best of the best. I know there was the whole, you used to only have amateurs, and basketball was kind of the sport that broke it into having professionals.
Well, and there's a lot of
playing in the
people that
Olympics.
think basketball is becoming the world sport because of the Dream Team. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back
Sure.
and got other countries really, really interested in basketball.
Yeah, but what is... And from a standpoint, why the distinction between someone who gets paid to do it versus someone who doesn't? It's just any other job. Everyone's
If you're
got
the
to have
best
a
at
job.
what you do, you're the best. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Everyone's got to have a job and make money. We've all got bills to pay, whether that's you're 7 feet tall and you're super athletic and you can play basketball, or if you're the guy down making springs to put on your garage door, manufacturing. Everyone's got to make money and pay their bills. So I don't see a need for a distinction between that. I wouldn't be surprised to see some teams with their star players, your Kevin Durant, your LeBron James, them pushing to get that in their contract. But my guess is the star players.
Sure. I'm not knowledgeable on that. Is there any type of contract you can sign, given the collective bargaining agreement, that states you can't do it?
I'm not. We'll have to have Dan on sometime. Grand Admiral Dan. He's kind of the CBA expert of our group of friends. So I don't know, but you'll see it in the NFL.
You would think it'd be a lot more popular if that was the case with teams.
Yeah, in the NFL, you get you can't play basketball, and every once in a while you'll see a player who's on the fringe and they get hurt playing basketball in the offseason, and the teams cut them because it's in their contract.
Yeah, Jason Williams for the Chicago Bulls with the motorcycle accident.
You just can't do it. So I would guess you'll see some teams push for that if it's allowed, and I would guess the top level stars, if they want, they have the leverage to push back. LeBron James can just say, "Hey, I'm going to do it." Tough. It's kind of interesting because in basketball they have one player has so much more impact than in any other sport other than perhaps the quarterback in football. So who's got the leverage, the team or the player who wants to do it? I don't know. It's a good question.
Brent, what do you think? Amateurs, pros? Does it matter to you?
It really doesn't matter. I think I think amateurs would be almost. With pros it's fun too, but I think either way, if it's the same level of competition across the board, it'll be a good time. I think pros, you can, especially in the Olympics, you make that argument that it'll drive more people to the game.
Well, it's funny. It kind of reminds me of the tired argument that I always hear that college basketball is better than the NBA, which is total bullshit. It's not. For sure. I don't care what anybody. You can't convince me on this. It's the best players in the world playing versus guys that maybe are going to be on a YMCA team after they get out of college.
The issue with amateurs too is there really aren't many amateurs anymore because people only go to college for 1 year.
Right. Yeah. If you went to amateurs for basketball, you'd end up with a mixture of college kids. Would they make an exception for D League versus NBA? You can't really, because if you're in the D League, you're still a professional, even if you're not the best of the best. So you would end up with just college kids, and they'd only. One thing that Team USA has done recently is they keep these rosters together with minimal turnover over the years. They have, like you said, Michael Carter-Williams, the 40th player. I don't know how many people are technically on Team USA, but they've tried to keep the roster more intact, and even in non-Olympic years, they are, playing together, building that chemistry. And if you had amateurs, you just wouldn't get that because you'd have a couple high school kids, I guess, some college players who never went into the NBA and now they're car salesmen or whatever, and they're playing for Team USA in the Olympics.
And you're not going to get any kind of viewership with something like that.
No, I want the professionals, and I understand from the team standpoint it's dangerous, but how often does it happen? This is a freak injury with Exum. It's a freak injury with Paul George. How many players have gone and not been injured though?
Well, that's me personally. I love it. I love when guys want to play for their country, whether it be Olympics, these, I forget what they call it every 2 years. They, a similar type.
World Basketball Championship or whatever it's called. No, that's baseball that does the World Baseball.
Because you hear a lot about athletes. Well, I guess stereotypical athletes in that typically in some of their off seasons, maybe they're doing some activities that you don't necessarily want them to be doing. So instead of getting into these shenanigans and that, you're working on your game, you're showing, to me it shows great character to want to represent your country no matter what, whether it's Olympics or any type of competition. As far as the injuries are concerned, we see NBA players play, and there's the Drew League, there's all these, like you said, pickup games. To me, you're going to play against other guys in these just off-season games and that, but I think you're more likely to get hurt in that type of situation than you are in a controlled environment where there's an actual training regimen. Me, myself, I'll admit to when I play basketball, getting upset, getting pissed off, and doing something maybe I shouldn't have done to a friend. Once that happens in one of these Drew League games, say somebody gets in a fight and gets knocked out or something, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. I'd much rather see a guy that wants to have an actual regimen in the off season, and I know Giannis in this instance is working on his game. I don't know what a lot of these other guys are doing in the off season. Like I said, they could be getting into all sorts of shenanigans. Me, I love it personally.
Yeah, and I don't take I lean more towards that, but I do understand the team's potential hesitation. But like you said, they're there. They've got a training staff. They're playing on an actual court. They're not playing out on a side, some sort of playground or whatever. And obviously, they're the Drew League and stuff. Those are a little more organized. But you have officials. You have actual courts and training staffs and everything. So I don't think you're any more likely to get injured there than anywhere else. And I don't think we should put our players in a bubble in the off season or anything. They got to work out. They got to train. We want them working on their shot, especially young guys like Giannis. It's great that they're out there and honing their skills. And hopefully, come here in a few months, it's going to pay off on the court. We're gonna see very soon.
And luckily, we don't have to worry about, well, as far as I know, anybody blowing their fingers off with fireworks. That seems to be an NFL thing, not an NBA thing. But
hey, I love fireworks, but I've always taken, I've been buying fireworks since I was about 12 years old. I literally got my first job at Paper Route when I was just shy of my 12th birthday, and I saved all my money year round to buy fireworks. I'm a huge firework fan, but
I had no idea that my co-host was a pyromaniac.
Hey, a lot of people don't know that, but it's not something to mess around with. I've had little firecrackers blow up in my hands, but they don't do anything. They sting a little bit. Those M80s, they're dangerous.
We'll have to talk about this in a different episode, I think. But I just want to get this off my chest. There's this stigma about the NBA. It's full of thugs and these. Really, that's the NFL to me. You're talking about domestic abusers, murderers, all the. You don't see that in the NBA anymore. But
right. Both sports have their bad apples. I think in the NFL it can happen more because there's 5 times as many players on a team.
Yeah, you have 32 teams, you have 53 players versus smaller rosters and only 30 teams. So I think Brent mentioned that, but I think that's the biggest issue. I think it's you go into any if you go down to Harley Davidson, they local Milwaukee company, they employ a ton of people. I'm sure they have plenty of people who on there not working, they're doing nefarious things. Whether whatever you want to define that is. I'm sure there are plenty of
now
people.
You're going after Harley, Chuck.
Well, they were just a big local company, Northwestern Mutual, whoever, any company, and even not local.
There goes one potential sponsor.
Yeah,
Thanks,
we're not going to get sponsored by them. I'm just saying, if you go to any company, if you have enough employees, someone is going to mess something up. We just don't hear about it when it's someone down at Harley because who cares? When it's your sports team and you follow them, you hear about it more. The media doesn't care that some guy at Harley blew his fingers off because it very well could have happened, or some guy Johnson Controls, or Northwestern Mutual, or Boeing, or whoever. We don't hear about it. Yeah, exactly. If anyone's looking to sponsor us, I'm dropping your names. But you hear about it when it's your athletes because they are covered. It's the same way a movie star, if they did it, you'd hear about it, or TV, whoever. They're just in the spotlight, so it gets blown up more. So I think you're right that I think it's an unfair reputation that the NBA has a thug culture. And I don't necessarily think the NFL does either any more than anyone else. There's just more of them than the NBA. And the NBA, I don't think they've had any problem since the whole, the Palace brawl. Has there been any super huge outrage?
Well, those were people from Detroit, so I mean, they kind of had it coming. Let's be honest.
Yeah, well, and it was Ron Artest, and he's he's kind of Meta World Peace or whatever his name is now. He changes it every couple of years, but he's not your average NBA player. If you want to throw the thug reference at him, he might fit that. He's a special kind of guy. Him and Dennis Rodman, they're just kind of they're characters. That's certainly not a portrayal of every person in the NBA. Most of them are legit good guys for the most part. Everyone's flawed. Everyone's got their flaws.
True, very true. Well, we talked about one of the key cogs, or the future of the Bucks and Giannis, and now I want to talk about the guy whose jersey Brent is wearing today, which we'll have a picture of that. Jabari Parker. We all know he had the injury last year that put him on the shelf for almost the entire season down in Phoenix there. He's rehabbing now, and I've seen some videos from the Bucks Twitter, and he looks pretty good. I mean, he definitely looks more svelte. I saw a video of him on a trampoline running around like a madman. I was kind of holding my breath watching this video. Like, should he be doing this? But by all accounts, he looks like he's doing pretty good. We did hear reports that he probably wasn't going to be back until January. I don't know if those reports were ever substantiated. or if that was just somebody kind of throwing something out there. But he's obviously such a huge piece for this Bucks team. I do think him and Giannis kind of share the mantra of the franchise player for this team. What are your expectations for Jabari this year? I mean, we're going to talk about it in a couple different senses, but I guess the first expectation is, when do you think Jabari's going to be back, Brent?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it'll be a calendar year 2016 before we see Jabari Parker back, and even then, I don't know how much we're going to see him. I think they realize what they have in Jabari Parker as a player, and they don't want to rush that this year because of, we want to make the playoffs, let's rush him back and do that. I think they want to be a little bit more cautious than that. That being said,
we've seen it in past years with the Bucks, guys getting rushed back. I mean, I think Ersan was one of the most egregious ones where he was all but telling the media that, like, I'm nowhere near healthy, but I think it was Scott Skiles who just was throwing him out there, like, you know, we're gonna work you back into health.
I think we saw it with Bogut a little too, you know, and I don't know that Bogut, he's never been 100% since his arm injury, but they rushed him back as well, and I think he wanted to rush back some too. I think Brent's right that they'll take it with Jabari. You know, he is one of those pieces of the future, and as much as, you know, we have high hopes for this year, we're not going to be winning. I mean, I guess nothing's impossible, but we're not going to be winning a championship this year. I don't think. Hey, if they prove me wrong, I will be happy to eat crow on that one. But I just don't think that's in the cards for this season. So that being said, you don't want to risk injury, and you know, ACL is typically at least a year. His injury was December 15th of last year, which the January timeline for return seems right about there. You'd be right after a year. And I think it's a year after surgery, and they have to wait for the swelling to go down before they do the surgery. So he probably didn't have his surgery until right around the turn of the year last year. So my guess, bring him back in January. He'll come off the bench. Maybe we see him starting after the All-Star break sometime in February. You know, I think they'd like to get him some starts next year. Probably some of that has to do with how the team's record is. You know, if they're really cruising without him, they may just keep him off the bench. If they figure something out without him. Not that he's not the future starter, but why mess up chemistry midseason if something's really, you know, if we have a good year, and that's
and you hope by that time that you have a good rotation hammered out.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think they would ease him in, you know, a couple minutes a game. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if he's sometime in January he's coming back and we only see him for 5 minutes a game or even less at first. You know. He's got to learn to trust himself once he's back too. Not only now, you know, the doctors will clear him and they'll say, "Hey, you're good to go." But you know, I've injured my ankles before. I've never done anything like an ACL. Yeah, you were there last time. I blew up my ankle pretty bad. I've thankfully never done an ACL. I've only done my ankles.
I do want to point out. I don't mean to cut you off, but since you brought it up, I got to tell this story. We were we're at a birthday party, and it was a private party, and it was at a very large house, and the owner of this house had a basketball court in the house. So we all decided we're going to play basketball. Chuck was so excited. This was right after the Fear the Deer season. He had Brandon Jennings Under Armour shoes, and he was so ready to, you know, show them off and play basketball in them. We start playing literally on the first offensive possession for his team. He goes down, and you ripped your Achilles, right?
No, it's just my ankle, not my Achilles, thankfully, just the side of my ankle. It was a high ankle sprain.
But I do want to point out the irony that the name of Brandon Jennings' shoes were Black Ice.
Yes.
So,
well, and to kind of tie this all together, our guest on the last episode, Luke, he bumped me. You know, if we're playing with officials, it's a hard foul.
Here we go.
You know, now I'm of the type when I'm playing pickup ball, I don't call fouls. I'm not that guy who you get little brush and foul. No, you know, it was a good hard defensive play. I don't fault him at all. And then I kind of bumped and rolled over Dan, Grand Admiral Dan. I kind of rolled over on him because he was in position to get a rebound, and we just kind of clash of bodies, and that was the worst one I've done in my life. I've done each of my ankles several times playing basketball over the years, and that was the worst.
The more and more I think about it, too, what a great analogy for Brandon Jennings' career as a Buck. So, you know, great start, and then, like, kind of almost immediately just get the rug taken out from underneath you.
Yeah.
But anyways, going back to Jabari, part of me wants to believe it I feel bad saying it, but maybe this was somewhat of a blessing in disguise for him, because he had a lot of concerns about his conditioning. Some people said he had some weight issues. maybe having this time off, I mean, from pictures, which obviously it's hard to judge from pictures, but from what I've seen, he looks a lot more cut, a lot more lean. Maybe he's taken this opportunity to take his diet a little bit more seriously, to take his training regime a little bit more seriously. I mean, do you think that maybe we'll see a, dare I say, more explosive Jabari next season, Brent?
I wouldn't necessarily say next season, because I don't equate the word explosive with coming back from ACL injury.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, other than Adrian Peterson, I can't think of anyone who came back from an ACL and was immediately as strong and fast as they were prior to the injury. And that's, he's just a freak of an athlete. Whatever you want to say about his personal life, and he just spent the last season suspended. But I can't think of anyone else who came back from an ACL injury at the same level as they were.
Well, he kind of screwed over a lot of athletes because now fans are unfairly wanting to see these guys come. Well, Adrian Peterson, he came back in 9 months or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Now these other athletes are kind of probably got to try to live up to that. And I hope Jabari is smarter with this, and he seems like he'd be a little bit more smart about it. But
he seems like he's putting in the work. We always see these videos of him, whether it's jumping on a trampoline or running a little bit, playing a little light contact basketball. He seems to be taking the rehab seriously from everything we heard. So that shows a lot right there that he's putting in the work. He's got his money. Not all his money. Obviously, down the road he could potentially sign as much as a max contract. We hope he turns into a max player. I think
he's got his endorsement deals. He's a high profile
player. He's got enough money
person.
that if he wanted to coast, and he had some good financial investors, he'd never have to work another day in his life. And he's out there, from all the videos and the talk we hear, he's out there busting his butt all the time, and that's good to see, because you see some of these guys get into the NBA, they get their money, and they get fat, and lazy, and he doesn't seem to have that attitude, which is that's huge to me.
Well, another part of what I think kind of makes it a blessing in disguise, looking at last year, that coupled with Brandon Knight's departure, I think Giannis took that as an opportunity to say, okay, for right now at least, this is my team. And now Giannis, I think his development took that much of a step forward just from kind of having to be the guy. That's one area where we could see maybe the Bucks take a little bit, or have a losing streak during that period when Jabari's coming back, because how do you integrate a player like that, someone so high profile that you want to be almost your franchise savior, into guys like Giannis and Greg Monroe, who hopefully should be rolling at that time, Chris Middleton. Do you think it's going to be an issue, him trying to work his way back in, or do you think it's going to be a seamless transition? I
really don't think chemistry-wise there's going to be much of an issue with that. I think they're going to be more than welcoming of a player of his ability into the lineup. That being said, sure, there's always going to be growing pains. You're always going to, just the fluidity of everything's going to change. Oh, he's going to shoot the shot when normally whoever's in there might not shoot it or whatever. But that being said, I think considering they're all young and they're all kind of built to grow together, I think there won't be a lot of issues.
Right, he's not like a Kobe where he's going to come in and just say, "Oh, here's my shots. You don't like it."
I'm right, and I think even though he's going to be coming back and they're going to have to integrate him into the lineup and playing, he's still around the team right now. There's still, as far as everything we hear, there's good chemistry in the locker room. They seem to get along. They like each other. I've not heard of anyone punching anyone else. Or,
Hello.
We've heard of some of that in years past. I haven't heard of anyone.
Well, if that's true, I'm willing to bet the person who got punched deserved it. But.
Probably. I think it takes a lot to deserve that, but you probably do if you can irritate your own teammate, someone who should be on your side of things enough that they're going to punch you, you probably deserve it. So I think from an on-court standpoint, there'll certainly be some growing pains, but I expect them to ease him in. Unless he's really recovered from this injury and he's ready to go start of the season, I expect him to come back and only get a handful of minutes, and they'll slowly build it up, and he'll take whoever the 10. Jason Kidd runs deep rotations. We see 10, 12 guys, how many ever are healthy, getting their minutes. So I expect we'll see him ease in and start taking minutes from those end of the bench guys. Yeah. So yeah.
I had to do it. Sorry.
Yeah. Little innuendo there. Anyone who knows Jake, he's great at innuendo. If you set him up, he will never pass it up. But yeah, I expect him to just a couple minutes, and he'll slowly build up, and eventually we'll see him maybe starting next year. I think whether he starts at any point next season depends on when he comes back from the injury, how he's doing physically, and how the team is doing. Because if they're rolling, I don't see them messing with it. I could just see him getting more and more minutes off the bench. But if they're in that playoff run for an upper, top 4 seed, I don't see them changing the starting rotation. And even though I want Jabari to be that guy, I wouldn't blame him mid-season.
Well, it's kind of strange because I know conventional wisdom says, like you said, a year timeline, maybe a little bit after that, but I feel like the Bucks have been very coy with this whole situation because
that is one of the issues.
Yeah, there's been conflicting reports. We heard January. Well, then there was a poster on Real GM, which, again, this is not, you can't take it as gospel, but that said they ran into a Bucks assistant coach, and he asked him about Jabari. He said he's definitely ahead of schedule. He's going to be ready for the season opener. The conflicting things, it makes you wonder. It wouldn't surprise me if that's maybe the big surprise is, we're starting the new season, and, hey, Jabari's ready to go. I mean, I would hope so, but, I'm not, like you said, I'm not going to push the issue. And I certainly would not have a problem with him going the entire season as a sixth man, particularly if they're rolling. Him and Giannis kind of play a similar game, and I think maybe you could, at least to bringing him back into the fold, maybe stunt Giannis's production just by having him in the starting lineup with it. So I think having a guy like Jabari Parker as your sixth man, you're in a pretty damn good spot if that's the case.
That would be, if that could happen, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams would love to have a number 2 overall pick who's.
And he's got versatility.
It's not Darko from Detroit, where he's number 2 only in name. He's shown the flashes that he probably deserved to be number 2. Now, hopefully, he's going to get back there. In addition to what you're saying, I meet a lot of people through my work. I meet several hundred people every month, and I ran into someone who works with someone who works with Jabari's rehab person. Basically, a third-hand story, we'll say, but they gave me a similar impression that Jabari was further along in his rehab than the Bucks hoped, and that there was the potential for him to be back through the season. So I know you said you heard that through a Real GM poster. I heard it through someone else.
And there's little videos of him playing basketball and dunking.
I also heard a rumor that he's done a fair amount of bowling for part of his rehab. I don't know, what that involves, but I heard he hangs out at. I'm not going to disclose which bowling alley, but I did hear the specific bowling alley of where he potentially bowls several times a week. I don't know what that has to do with his rehab, and I don't even know if it was true because, again, I meet a lot of people through my job, and I'm getting information sometimes second or even third-handed. But yeah, that's I've heard myself through the grapevine that he is further along than the Bucks initially hoped, because an ACL injury is realistically, standard is 12 to 18 months. That's just kind of the going rate. They're not all Adrian Peterson, but the season's going to start about 10 months after the injury or surgery. Right in that 10-month range. So there's the potential if he's a fast healer and he's working hard. He could be ready, and maybe we see him just getting a couple minutes off the bench at the start of the season. Well, be fantastic.
We talked about his role, what that's going to be with the team moving forward. Let's talk a little bit about the offseason in general. They made some moves. What I want to know is, do you think we're done making moves? The latest being Chris Copeland was signed, I think in the hopes of recreating some of the production that Jared Dudley created when he was brought in a trade. I don't know, do you think they're done? Is this team a finished product? Is this what we're going to see opening night?
I think it's one of those things that I think they're done now. I think for the next couple months they're not going to make any moves just because of, they have pretty much, they have their guys. I don't know if these are the guys that they're going to, this is our championship core right here is this team. But I think they're definitely set for now. It's going to the rest of the offseason, might as well not even, check the news because they're not going to be signing anybody. There's really nobody else to sign either. That being said, if a trade comes along or if something like that comes along and it's October and they can either pick up a really good, pick up next year first round draft pick or something like that. If there's an offer to be made that'll help improve this team, They'll certainly do that.
So
but
you think that they would sacrifice this year for more future pieces at this point in time?
Yeah, I don't really know what they'd have that they could sell, but I think if there would be something, they would probably take it. I mean, it's hard because I'm more of a baseball fan. I always think long-term baseball more so than basketball, but just they're really. I mean, I don't know what they could trade, but I think they would. I think they know. I mean, I guess it depends on Jabari and everything, but if they know, hey, maybe we could be better next year and lose a little bit more this year, I don't think they would be necessarily opposed to that.
Because one of my big fears is that, given the success they had last season, that they were going to herd Cole this thing, say, you know what? Who cares about rebuilding? Let's go now. We're ready to win now. My gut tells me they're not ready to win now, that they were kind of playing over their heads last year. And part of me hopes that they don't, like I said, go down that Herb Cole mindset of trying to get maybe some more middling veteran type of players, which you could argue that their offseason has kind of been halfway in between, bringing in those vets and getting younger. Typically, it doesn't work out.
I think if that was the plan, though, they would have. I mean, I know there's, potentially other issues with Dudley wanting a contract extension or whatever. I think they would have, okay, Jared Dudley, we'll sign you to a contract extension, or they'll make more of those.
If they were thinking that,
yeah. If they'll make more of those mediocre moves. I think losing your Jared Dudleys and stuff and signing Chris Copeland, like that was kind of their way of saying, you know what, we know what we have, and we're just gonna kind of roll with it and see where the chips lay out.
I want to point out the Chris Copeland signing. Thank you, John Hammond, for realizing that it is okay to sign guys to 1 year deals.
I know.
You don't have to go multi-years, no matter what.
That was the most refreshing thing out of all of that. Was like, 1 year only? Like that was like, I don't know why every contract has been 2 or 3 years for her,
or 5, like a Drew Gooden.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean that's even with the signings we did this season. No one is really a vet that's kind of been around the league a bunch of times. We didn't sign a Drew Gooden or a John Salmons. We signed Greg Monroe, and yes, that was big money. But again, he's 25 years old. Chris Copeland, he's I think he's 30 now. He's right around that 30-year-old range. He's older, but he's only been in the NBA 3 years. He kind of had to work his way to the NBA.
This isn't like bringing in Jerry Stackhouse,
exactly,
and Marquise Daniels. Well, I guess it could be closer to that. But.
Yeah, so. And they're on short deals, like you said. So I think right now the roster's set, but I think any roster in any sport is always fluid. If a deal comes around, if another team calls and says, we're giving you this, and they think it'll make the team better long term, I think they would make the deal. I don't think that's realistic, just because I don't know what we even have to trade off. We're not, obviously Giannis isn't on the table, Jabari's not on the table. We can't even trade Greg Monroe if we wanted to. Same with Middleton, because we just signed them to contracts. Really, the only player we could potentially trade away would be Michael Carter-Williams, and I don't think they're ready to do that yet. I think they want to see what he's got.
Right.
I think maybe O.J. Mayo, he recaptured a little bit of value. He's an expiring contract, a veteran player that is played a lot better this past season than the one before.
That's true. I think he probably has more value at the trade deadline than he does right now. So I can't see a deal good enough to get rid of him at this point coming along. So I think the roster's set. This is what we'll see going into training camp, going into at least the start of the season. I think probably at the deadline, I'd be shocked if we don't see something, whether it's one of our expirings going out for a win-now move because the team's really clicking, or selling off an O.J. Mayo for a younger piece. Or
and they are usually pretty active at the trade deadline.
Yeah, so we've been active pretty much every year at the trade deadline, so I don't see any reason that would change. It's just a matter of, are we trading O.J. Mayo and Chris Copeland to get a future first-round draft pick or a young player, or are we trading, Rashad Vaughn for something to win now? And then hopefully that doesn't turn into a Tobias Harris situation. It's... there's a lot of ways this could go, but I think for now, until at least the start of the season, we're probably pretty set. Other than maybe you'll bring in some camp bodies, and maybe someone makes the team that we don't expect. But I think we're pretty set.
Sure. I kind of wanted to ask. I mean, let's talk about the starting five. I think, assuming that Jabari's not ready to start the season, you're probably looking at Monroe as your starting center, Giannis at the power forward, Chris Middleton at the 3. I'm going to say O.J. Mayo starting at 2, and Michael Carter-Williams as your point guard. As far as the rotation is concerned, there are some interesting battles that are going to happen. One of the most intriguing to me is the backup point guard. We traded in part of the Brandon Knight trade. We got Tyler Ennis, who was a first-round pick the last year of the Phoenix Suns. Still very young, was just a freshman that came out of Syracuse and more of a true point guard type. I'm interested to see, and this will probably kind of coincide with what we just talked about as far as, is this a young team? Is this a veteran team? Is it rebuilding? Do we give run to Tyler Ennis versus someone like Jared Bayless? I think even though it's in the grand scheme of things a very small move with the team moving forward, I think it says a lot about the mindset if you say we're going to kind of go with the growing pains of a young point guard versus Jared Bayless. You know what you're going to get, which is kind of a streaky, more shoot-first type player. Same thing goes with O.J. Mayo versus our first-round pick, Rashad Vaughn, who's still, I believe, 18 years old. Is only going to be, I think he was the youngest player in this past draft.
He was the youngest player in the draft, and I believe 18 is right. He might be 19 or close to it.
Sure.
But he's not any older than 19. I think a lot of that will depend what they see in training camp.
Damian Inglis was another guy I wanted to bring up too.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a lot of youth. That is probably a very interesting question. I think a lot will depend on what the coaching staff sees in practices, what they see in games. You saw last year from Kidd, he's not afraid to play youth. Giannis got a lot of minutes, but at the same time, when he needs to send a message or they need to learn something, he's also not afraid to bench him. We saw a couple games where Giannis was just not in the lineup. He didn't play. Coach's decision did not play. And to his credit, Giannis always responded. So, I think they're not afraid to play youth with this coaching staff, but at the same time, I don't think they're going to play youth just to play youth. If they're not doing their things that they want to see, they'll tell them to work on it in practice, whether that's defending or I think it mostly comes down to defense. From what we've heard, he doesn't. From everything I understand, the coaching staff, not that they don't care about offense, but their concern is putting forth that defensive effort. Getting your assignments, being in the right position. And offense is less of a concern, which defense does win championships to a certain extent, though three-point shooting wins championships right now as well.
Those seem to be the two key things that everybody focuses on, three-point shooting and defense. Brent, would you be okay with the Bucks taking a step back if it meant getting these young guys more experience, your Tyler Ennis's, your Damian Inglis versus Chris Copeland, Jared Bayless, O.J. Mayo, those type of players?
I think, generally speaking, I would prefer to play the younger players, but I think you always want to take that standpoint. I think if you're playing the veterans and they're winning games, I think you want to roll with that. I think that's the big thing.
Unless you're say at Cleveland, a Golden State, a team with San Antonio, that's for sure are going to be contenders in that particular.
Right, we're talking like Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah, it's. I think you want the young players to grow and learn, but I think a lot of that is primarily done in practice. I mean, I think game scenarios help, but I think they learn a lot and they become better players in practice. And if Jason Kidd sees them in practice and thinks they're playing well, then that's generally when he makes the move to, okay, you're playing well, we'll get you minutes this game or whatever. I think he's very much a practice to practice sort of guy and kind of makes his rotations based off of that.
I have more confidence in this current coaching staff than I did in, say, Larry Drew.
Oh, for sure.
Larry Briscoe, Terry Porter.
Yeah, exactly. In the last,
Jim Boylan,
20
Scott
years,
Skiles.
yeah. I mean, I had more
Levy,
faith in Scott Skiles
Chris
than most
Ford.
of the recent coaching staffs too. At least Skiles has proven it. He wears his welcome out very quickly. It seems to be 3 years and he's done. He's going to Orlando this year.
I'm very interested to see how that's going to go.
Poor Tobias.
Yeah, I bet they have a couple good years. They're going to show improvement, and then by year 3, year 4, he's going to start wearing out his welcome, and that'll be the end for Scott Skiles. It's a pattern at this point. He's done it everywhere he's gone. It's not something he did once or twice. He's done it 3 times now, and I expect a 4th time. I expect that the coaching staff knows, and I'll kind of until they show otherwise, I will kind of put my faith in them and trust their judgments. They certainly see these players more than I do. I don't have time to go sit down and watch practices. A lot of the practices aren't open to the public, but even the ones that are, I don't have time for that. I've got a job and bills to pay, and I'm a working person, so
grown ass man.
Exactly. So I kind of put a lot of faith in them to make those judgment calls, but I'm generally in favor of playing youth, but not just playing youth for the sake of youth. If they're not cutting it, they gotta work on whatever it is, whether that's their defense, their conditioning, their shooting, whatever it is they need to work on. The coaching staff will communicate that to them.
Well, and we talked a little bit about Chris Copeland. I've been told that when they sign him, I raised my eyebrow a little bit, and I've been told by certain people, calm down. He's just going to be a 12th man, just a practice player, a veteran to have around. But this was kind of the same thing that I was told about Jared Dudley, that he was just a throw-in a trade. And Jared Dudley ended up being, you could argue he was the engine that made that team go last year. He was the heart of the team. He was the heart and soul of that team. Granted, the results were pretty streaky with him, but I look at a guy like Copeland. I think a very, very similar type player, combination forward, power forward, small forward combo, a little bit undersized, but you hope that he's going to bring that shooting touch. Looking at his numbers, he came in the league at age 28 with the New York Knicks and had just a great year with them. I believe he shot 42% from three with them, ended up signing with Indiana, didn't play much. I think he got hurt, and then last year his numbers just kind of fell off a cliff. Part of me hopes they're not thinking that they're getting this great shooter like he was in New York. Maybe you hope he meets somewhere in the middle and he's just an effective player for the small minutes that you need him for. Do you think Copeland's going to be that Dudley this year, or do you think it was just maybe this is just all overreactionary and that he's just a guy?
I think honestly a lot of it depends upon Jabari. If Jabari's back for the beginning of the season, I don't think we're going to see Chris Copeland much. I think if Jabari's out, we're going to see more Copeland than we'd probably like to, depending on your standpoint.
That'd be a small ball lineup, because I think Copeland is like 6'5", 6'6". So
I think they are going to be playing a lot of small ball, to be perfectly honest. But especially with they're probably playing a lot of 2-point guards and stuff like that with Grievous Vasquez. But yeah, I think we'll see. I mean, it depends on which Chris Copeland we get. If he doesn't improve over his Indiana numbers, I don't think we'll really be seeing him much this year.
So it's going to be more like a prove-it thing for Jason
right.
Kidd, who, again, this was another guy that Kidd is very close to. It's a guy that Kidd played with. We talked about it on the last podcast. Jason Kidd bringing in his friends. Is this just a Kenyon Martin thing, or is this going to be a key piece? It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Well, and I think any team, no matter how good they are, whether it's Cleveland, Golden State, there's often a lot of surprises in that 6th, 7th, 8th man off the bench. Then those guys that'll play, they only play 8, 9, 10 minutes a game, but over the course of a season, they really contribute something. Could Chris Copeland be one of those guys? Yeah, he could. I'm certainly not expecting it, but even the championship teams, they've usually got one or two guys who kind of show up out of nowhere, surprise you, whether it's a rookie or they brought it. San Antonio does it all the time. They'll bring in a guy who's just been a he's middle of the road NBA guy. He goes to San Antonio, and all of a sudden, boom, he's like all-star level. And I'm not saying Chris Copeland's going to do that, but there's always the potential. I tend to think he's more going to be 6 to 10 minutes off the bench, end of the rotation guy, whatever. Just someone's in foul trouble, someone needs a breather, someone rolls up on their ankle and needs to go stretch out in the locker room. I think that's when you'll see him. But you never know. He certainly doesn't really have a proven NBA track record to know that this is what he is. He kind of up and down, like you said, really good in New York with his shooting percentages, and then kind of fell off a cliff in Indiana, part of that injury. So yeah, I think it's kind of a wait and see with him. But like Brent said, I think if Jabari's not ready, we'll see more of him than we will if Jabari's ready, because Jabari will certainly get the minutes when he's ready to go. He is the future. And in terms of small ball, yeah, he's undersized, but our team overall is not exactly small. We're going to be rolling out Greg Monroe.
Yeah.
We're going to roll out Giannis. Middleton's fairly big for a 2. Michael Carter-Williams is fairly big for a point guard. Unless we're starting Grievous Vasquez or Tyler Ennis, those guys are a little smaller. But our projected starters, outside of the question mark around Jabari and who's potentially starting there, we've got a lot of size. So I think I don't see any way we're going to play a true small ball this year, just because of no matter what you do, you're going to have 2 7-footers in there with Monroe and Giannis, unless one of them gets injured. Fingers crossed that they don't.
Well, it's a new NBA. I mean, we saw Draymond Green at 6'6" playing center for stretches with Golden State last year. Really, if you can space the floor, that's really I think that's more important so much than size. if he could space the floor, rebound, play good defense.
Well, that was arguably one of the key moves in the NBA Finals was when Bogut was pulled out of the starting lineup in favor of Andre Iguodala. You know, you pull a 7-footer out and put in a guy who's 6'9", 6'8" for
He's
Iguodala.
about 6'6".
Even small, yeah. So that you give up a lot of size, but they brought in the spacing, the shooting, and the offense, and Cleveland was never able to kind of make a counter move to go against that. So we've got the size to start, but maybe we end up playing. Maybe we see him more than we think in terms of Copeland. Maybe he's the guy. I don't know. He could be.
And before we go, you brought up Golden State and their shooting and how that was such a huge factor in the NBA Finals and them winning a championship. There was something that happened this week. I guess it wasn't really happening, but there was a gentleman who announced that he's not necessarily retired, even though he didn't play last year. Jesus Shuttlesworth, a.k.a. Walter, a.k.a. Ray Allen, he just kind of put it out there that, in the right situation, maybe he'd play this year. I don't know. Maybe come home last year with the Bucks. Give us just throwing it out there, Bucks.
Yeah,
I think there'd be a lot of people that'd be excited to see it.
And I don't know if last year if Cleveland reached out to him or not. Maybe he just doesn't have. Maybe he doesn't like LeBron. I don't know. It's kind of surprising to me that he went the whole season without getting signed by someone. And
he was 40, mate. He could have just been resting.
Right, and I don't know if anyone did reach out to him. How serious
I thought I remember
were.
hearing the Clippers did, but
yeah. Well,
I remember hearing the Clippers, Cleveland, Golden State. I mean, San Antonio, Miami again. I heard a lot of teams reached out to him.
And I don't fault anyone for not wanting to play with the Clippers. Like they could call up and offer me a contract.
Are they the most hateable team in the history of the NBA?
Yeah.
Especially now with this whole
definitely the most punchable, as you would call them.
Yeah, most punchable faces ever assembled on one
Although
team.
Matt Barnes being gone from them makes them slightly less punchable. But.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to play for them on a personal, I'd probably do it just because of the money. It's way more money than I make in my current job.
Wait,
but
Chuck, you're saying you would leave your current job to play in the NBA? That's crazy.
I probably would just based on the money, but I would have to think long and hard with the Clippers because I don't, like you said, they're so hateable. I watch them and at least Matt Barnes is gone. They just, from top to bottom, I don't know if there's a team I personally disliked more. Ray Allen's not retired. I don't know that it's realistic, but I would imagine, if the team is doing well, he always spoke highly of his time in Milwaukee. There was no bad blood when he left. It was just kind of one of those, sometimes it's a business. And I think
shitty business.
Yeah, exactly. In hindsight, we'd all do things differently. But at the time, and I don't think there's any bad blood there. It's not like some players, they leave, there's a lot of bad blood. I don't know that there's any bad blood. I think he'd certainly consider it. I probably think he's retired, but hey, you never know. Maybe you got him in there if you're doing well. He wants to come bring a ring to Milwaukee.
I can guarantee you, Bucks, you'd have one more season ticket holder if you did. So maybe we should get that Twitter revolution going.
Okay, sure.
Hashtag, come home Ray, bring back Ray. Something.
You would go to the games, but then Grand Admiral Dan, he'd stop going to the games.
That's true.
I don't know what it is.
Dan Helsel, aka Grand Admiral Dan, despises Ray Allen.
I'm not
thinks
sure
he's
why.
the scum of the earth.
Yeah, he told me, if he was in an elevator with him and Hitler and two bullets, he'd shoot Ray Allen twice. I don't know why, but he just doesn't like Ray Allen for whatever reason. But I think it's less likely that I think he's probably done. Age catches up with all of us. It's just the reality of life but hey, if they want to bring him back, I'd take it. I've got a Ray Allen Supersonics jersey upstairs in my closet, because why not?
Yeah. Well, Brent, thanks a lot for coming on to the podcast. We'll probably have you on again. Once again, if you want to just the name of your podcast?
The AV Conversation. We post
all things nerd.
Pretty much. We post an episode every Sunday and talk about primarily movies, television, comic books, and food. We always talk about food. We always review new food items. So
and I was just looking at the promo for your show today. It was Chef Boyardee chicken parmesan, which sounds like possibly the worst thing I could ever eat.
Is it? Listen to the episode. I don't know.
Listen to the episode and you'll find out. It sounds awful to me. But you'll have to listen to find out.
And once again, if you're listening to this podcast, we thank you very much, and we hope that you continue to do so. That's going to do it for Buck Life. Hashtag bring back Ray.